Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us tonight on our Town Hall Education Edition. I'm Maya Engel, joined by Mark Gillette, and of course, the new school year just started in Northern Michigan, and with the new school year comes new opportunities and new challenges. And we have three panelists here who are going to really break down all those different opportunities and challenges, and also answer any of your questions. But before we get to any questions, let's start with some introductions from our panelists. We have three superintendents from different school districts across Northern Michigan. John, why don't we start with you? Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Dr. John Van Wagner. I'm the superintendent of Traverse City Area Public Schools, and we're the largest district in Northern Michigan of about 9,000 students. We have about 300 square miles of district, so also a large geographic district, like also my colleagues. And this is my 8th year as a superintendent, and this is my 4th year in Traverse City, and just excited to be with my colleagues and the opportunity to talk to you tonight.
All right, Katie, tell us about yourself.
I'm Katie Zenekis-Mikowski. I'm the superintendent at Johannesburg-Lewiston Area Schools. Like John, our district covers over 300 square miles, but we service 720 students. And so we have fewer students and experience a lot of those small rural school issues. This is my 9th year in Johannesburg-Lewiston Area Schools and my 12th year as a superintendent.
And last but not least, Scott.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Cozio. I'm superintendent at Shar-Am ISD. I've been a superintendent now for a little over 8 years, little over a year up here, and I had 7 years downstate in a local district. At Shar-Am, we service 11 school districts and 2 charter schools and a handful of non-publics as well. And we go from the tip of Torch Lake in the northern part of Antrim County all the way to the bridge, and from basically 75 over to the coast of Lake Michigan. So it's quite a beautiful area that we have, and a lot of miles, as my colleagues have already mentioned, in between.
Yeah, I imagine when you get together with other superintendents, they are shocked at the territory that your district covers and how many miles you have to bus kids to get to school. All right, so we have been reporting a lot about when Michigan's budget came out, the term record funding for education in the state budget. I believe per pupil funding, some of the highest that we've ever seen, if not the highest we've seen in the state. So I'd like to go through one at a time and tell us, with this record level of funding, what impact does that really have on your districts? John, let's start with you.
So, it definitely is a help. All the funding that we can get to be able to service our students is important. And especially as we talked about with that wide geographic range, there are expenses and things that we have not, been funded for that other districts, don't have the issue with, transportation being one of them. So there are some districts that are only less than 2 square miles, but yet have received the same transportation funding that we have. This is a budget that has addressed that. We're still kind of waiting to find out exactly what those numbers are, but that's an example that has really just created some equity that we haven't had. Often in Northern Michigan, it's just it's hard to recruit staff, and we've paid less because probably not having some of the resources that downstate has. And so we've been able to, a lot of districts been able to do a little bit more there. Again, always want to pay our educators everything we can, but it helps us a little bit at that cause, especially with the inflation and the things that we do have going on now. And so it provides some things. And then there were some very specific funding categoricals, such as school safety and mental health, that have been in this budget. And, those are great, and we're very thankful for those. At the same point, I know we'll probably get to in questioning, finding some staff in those areas, finding social workers, finding nurses, finding, some of these people that help with that. While we actually have maybe the funding sometimes for the first time, we don't necessarily have the human capital and the people that we need, especially with housing issues in Northern Michigan and so many of these things. So definitely some challenges for us in that way. But again, many positives that come with that we're happy to be able to continue to try and provide better for our kids here in Northern Michigan.
All right, Scott, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's a little different for an ISD. We have very little of our funding that comes from the foundation grant provided by the state. But, an ISD's role is to help advocate for all the things John just said, and helping our local districts to keep those dollars in the classroom, directly impacting the instruction of kids. All of the things that John talked about are all things that impact how a student is educated, which is important. But we know the most important thing is that high level of quality instruction. And so it just really has helped us to keep those high level, highly proven strategies of instruction in front of the kids every day. And I think we'll start to see those benefits as we continue to move through, and just excited, like John said, to have some of those categoricals, but we really would like to see those moved into the foundation grant. So we're assured those annually. Some of those things John mentioned, we have to advocate and lobby for on an annual basis. And we're very grateful, absolutely grateful to the work of the legislature, and excited about our partnership with the legislature moving forward.
And Katie?
Everything, I would echo everything that John said. We've worked on a lot of these issues for a long time. We fought for years to get a 2X formula passed so that all of our districts are getting the same foundation allowance. And that's made a huge difference. The additional funds are wonderful because we can start to do a little bit more. We've been able to give staff raises and do some things like that. But I think it's also important to remember that the rate at which our allocations have grown doesn't necessarily match the rate at which other businesses have grown. And so it still puts us in a situation where we're competing for that human capital. And to get quality people into our schools is the most critical piece to help our students. So really, the funding is great, especially that transportation categorical. John worked on that for a long time. Our buses travel a lot more miles, and with a 2.5-hour routes that my students ride, it's not always possible to move to an electric bus and all the expenses that would entail. So getting these additional funds is great. Scott brought up, it'd be great if they weren't in categoricals and just a straight funding. I'll even take down that path that a lot of the funding streams that we get as schools, we have to apply for. We have to apply for them in grants. We have to write for them. We have to track specific funds for them and all the auditing pieces that go along with that. And in a smaller district, it's me and 2 other people in this office, and that's it, right? So our smaller districts really have the same reporting and all the same requirements, but we just don't have the same human capital to get it all done.
And of course, we will talk more about the staff shortage in a little bit, but let's stay on the budget topic just for one more second. So you all kind of mentioned your biggest priorities, but what would you say is your biggest expense in each of your districts?
Is transportation that significant expense? The numbers that we've seen in the past when we've done stories on this, it's staggering how many miles, how many gallons of gas that you guys buy every year. Is that one of those unrealized from the outside looking in expenses that people don't think about if you're not in the education forum?
I worked on our transportation report today from last year. And I can tell you that while we were down a route in personnel, we were up in miles and up in fuel from previous years.
Wow. So the budget news, it sounds like I heard from all of you what sounded like appreciation, gratefulness.
For sure.
Okay, so I'm getting head nods there, so that's good. But I'm also feeling a little bit like it's a step in the right direction, not we have crossed a finish line.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right, Mark.
Totally putting words in your mouth there, but
no, we're making good progress. And definitely grateful for that. And again, it's that partnership with the legislature and helping them understand the challenges that both Katie and John talked to you about that our districts face on a daily basis. And Northern Michigan has much different challenges than downstate. I was downstate. I was in Jackson County, and coming up here and hearing the challenges of those. Katie's not kidding. 2.5-hour bus rides. That's a real thing. And our buses, depending on the needs of our students, have to travel to the programs that we have in different locations. So making sure that our kids get those services they need is definitely a challenge that is, as John said, it doesn't exist in the 2 mile wide district.
Right, absolutely. So staying on the budget, but switching gears a little bit, free lunch programs, free and reduced lunch programs. When COVID was around and we were under those situations, everybody got it with the funding this year. It's our understanding that every child will be eligible for that. Is that a good thing?
It's a great thing. When I started here 9 years ago, our district was at 51% of our students counting for the free and reduced lunch. We are now at 79%.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
We are now at 79%.
79%. Okay.
My one elementary building is over 80%. What we had already taken the steps to do that. We were providing free breakfast and lunch last year. And that really benefited our students. We actually have an after-school program in one of our buildings that provides dinners too.
Wow. That's great. A similar situation, John?
Yeah, I think that, just the reality that a hungry kid, is going to be challenged to learn. It's just that simple. And we've seen growth as well. We're well above 30%, approaching 40%. We have 2 elementaries that are 100% qualify prior to this. So, again, when, we talk about maybe some of those things from COVID that we did see, to be able to see that opportunity for every kid to get breakfast and lunch, this was one of those things that I think afterwards we all said, wow, how awesome was that? And so I think the legislature really took that to heart and understood that. And our governor, really was a huge proponent of that in her executive boilerplate. And so to have that opportunity to, supplement state funds with the federal funds that we get. And so it's really important still that we have our parents fill out that free and reduced lunch application, because that's money we get from the federal government based on that. And what we're afraid of is if we don't get those, there are other funding sources that we get based off those numbers. And we want the state to be able to continue to afford to be able to do this. So we need to make sure we absorb all those federal dollars. So we ask parents, please fill out those forms still. Get those into us so that we have those. That allows us to be able to capture as much federal funding for not only the breakfast and lunch program, but also other programs that we get federal funding for. But definitely a huge piece to this that we're thankful that we have kids that we know if they're not at school, they don't get food. And so, that it always kind of even weighs into our decisions. And I think a lot of people don't understand snow days sometimes even. That sometimes if it's something where we think we can go and people go, well, why did you just, you had the ability to take it off. Yeah, but we have a lot of kids that won't get breakfast or lunch, or like Katie even said, even a supper, if they're not at school. And so that all is in that equation of public schools. That's one of those things that I don't know people always recognize and realize that, in our district, we had over 400 homeless students. So those are vital resources for us to be able to have to make sure that kids have what they need to be able to learn.
And it levels the playing field.
Yeah.
It gives every kid that opportunity.
Yeah. So we're gonna push pause on this, because when I saw the nods when John was talking about fill out the forms.
Fill out the forms.
Fill out the forms, right. So let's just push pause. If you're a parent and you haven't filled out the form, is it you? Do they go to the office or do they go online? This seems so important based on your reactions. So go ahead. Somebody explain to us, what, as a parent, what do we have to do?
Ours were sent home.
Okay, they're sent home.
Our forms were sent home. They're also available through the website.
Okay. So get those done. Is there a deadline to get those done?
The sooner the better.
Yeah,
So-
we're going to continue to take those, but over the next couple of weeks here, and again, it just establishes for us those funding sources. And so, they're available in buildings, they're online. If they don't have it, they can contact any of our offices. We're happy at the locals to provide that. And just, again, it provides so many resources from food to even other programs for many of our at-risk students that they use that formula for those other funding capabilities. So it's an important piece of data. And so all the help we can get from parents on those, whether you think you qualify or not, we really would appreciate that form filled out.
Look at those nods again.
Yeah.
That's important stuff, folks. So go ahead and get on that.
Mhm. And before we move on to the next topic, I just want to remind all of our viewers at home that if you folks do have any questions that you want answered from friendly superintendents. You can just leave a comment on our Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or X, I should say, and we will try to get to as many as we can. But now let's move on to a big topic. It's a big challenge that all three of you mentioned you are dealing with this year and have for the past few years, and that is staffing shortages. So let's just start with, how hard is it to hire right now?
It
Katie, you wanna
is.
start?
It's monumentally more difficult than it's ever been in the past. In 2010, I had 9 positions open in Rogers City. I had 250 applicants for those 9 positions.
Wow. Okay.
I posted a band and music position a couple of weeks ago. I have no qualified applicants. So, and in a district like ours, that there's one person that runs that show and that program, and without one person doing that, it's an opportunity our kids could miss out on. So it's emotionally taxing when you think about it as well, because we don't want our kids to miss out on anything. We feel we fight for our rural and students to receive every opportunity that those in the larger districts do. I grew up in Oakland County. I am constantly thinking back and comparing to what we had. And that is what drives us to make sure that our students have all of those opportunities, and we can't provide them without the people.
Scott, is the ISD hiring?
Yeah, we are, Mark. We actually had a special ed teacher coming to us from Nevada, and about a week before school started, informed us she would not be able to come due to not being able to find housing. And so it's just such a challenge on top of challenge. And just the candidate pool, as Katie alluded to, and I'm sure John will share in a minute, is just, I mean, it's a fraction of what we used to have. And I think one of the things that we've noticed across the state is that we need to look at this as a real systemic problem. And why is this happening? And we've looked at it across the 56 ISDs, and 48 of us have come together in a consortium for the Talent Together is what it's called. And we are working with the assistance of the legislature to put about, starting this fall, about 900 teachers back into the post-secondary programs to become teachers within a year or two, depending on what type of education they're coming to us with. And so, again, another partnership with the legislature, and also with the dollars that they've provided to the Department of Education for what they're calling Grow Your Own. We all recognize it as a problem, and the 48 ISDs coming together is unprecedented, and just excited about being able to start with a cohort this year of 900, and we've already got applicants for the following year. And so just excited to be able to do that. Now that's hopefully a long-term solution, but what we're all dealing with is right in front of us right now.
And I would definitely echo what Scott said in a lot of ways there, that these programs that we have are great. They are taking people that might be in a paraprofessional position now, or some type of school position, or even outside of, that don't have a teaching certificate, and maybe just have a bachelor's degree or a little bit short. So we have these innovative programs that the state and have put money into to be able to provide funding for the tuition for it, and many at no cost at all to the individual. So they're great. But like we said, and everybody's kind of asking us, okay, well, does that solve your problem? And the answer is that's going to take a couple of years to come to fruition, and probably still won't be enough candidates even still, but it's definitely a piece to that puzzle. And so we're thrilled with that. But then, I think that you have to look at the support staff too. That's where it really is a struggle. You look at, as we've talked about, transportation bus drivers. There is a national shortage of CDL drivers across the country. And so, you take semi drivers are needed, and then you take a bus driver for a school bus. That's even a different thing, because you're working generally early in the morning, then you have this gap when kids are in school. Right. And then you come back, and then you do that in the afternoon from 2 to 6, depending on how long your route is. So it takes a really unique individual. In the past in Northern Michigan, we've had some farmers that, they've been able to maybe, some districts have been able to provide and put together maybe some other, hours with it to provide insurance for their families. And for some people, it's been unique that it's worked really well. But when we have charter bus drivers that are short all over, and you have semi drivers that are short, and the road commission is looking for people because there's nobody to plow the roads when it's snowy, or those elements, it's a national shortage that we're struggling with. We're seeing many professionals, and I can just tell you that I've gone through the bus driver certification program. I haven't, had to get in a situation where I actually run an actual route. I have had some things where I've driven a bus and have in an emergency situation the ability, if a bus gets stuck in the snow and our mechanics are all driving and all of our facility supervisors are driving, I can at least go and take a bus and take it out there and make sure the kids are safe. But and we're seeing that many across northern Michigan. There's articles I see every few days of a superintendent that is in a situation where they just have to, and so that is really a struggle, and we've seen it in the service industry outside of even education. Food service workers that we have. Restaurants are struggling to have servers and cooks. There's not many restaurants you won't go to in northern Michigan doesn't have a sign that says hiring cooks. Interview immediately, and we're in the same situation with that. So I will put a plug in for all of us. If there's anybody out there that's interested at all in driving a school bus or interested in working food service, we have great opportunities with great benefits, great wages. And can help great kids. So, it's just really, we're putting it together, but we've got people that have other jobs that they normally do that are having to do this on top of. And it is a strain on our systems. And there's been a few times over the last couple of years where we've had to pause in our district secondary transportation. And, that's hard. I really think of a district, my former district, Alpena, which was 604 square miles. Katie's in that situation of a small district with large miles. If those kids don't have a ride to school on a bus, they don't have a ride, and so that's really the dire, we're pulling it off with toothpicks and dental floss, almost to have enough people. Thank God for the people that we have that do great work every day. But honestly, if I had 12 to 15 CDL drivers that would drive bus, I'd hire them tomorrow. That is literally the situation that we're in.
What is the position right now that's hardest to fill in terms of you have a spot, whatever department? If you walked into your office tomorrow and there was a resume on your desk, what would that person do you'd be like, we're calling this person right now?
If I had a K-12 music one, I think all of my administrators would dance.
And we'll say that one more time for us.
K-12 music. If I had somebody certified to do K-12 music that wanted to come work with great kids, my administration would dance. There'd be a party.
They would dance to that music, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, all right. So Katie needs a K through 12 music teacher. All right, Scott, what do you need?
Well, it's that special education teacher that we need. We've got qualified people, but we're pulling them from other positions because, like I mentioned earlier, we're trying to keep those resources in the classroom. So we've got some support coaches and some consultants that we use across our programs and also our local district programs that we've had to pull out of those and put into a classroom to be with kids that have those needs. And so it's those, in addition to special ed, like Katie said, it's going to be those kind of, niche positions that are hard to find. And like John said, I'll take, 6 bus drivers and a few riders too. And I'll echo what John said. The people we have are tremendous because I've not heard much complaining at all about the additional things that they've had to take on and do. They're doing it for the kids. And we're just so grateful for the staff that we currently have and trying to make sure we sustain and maintain that staff. That's actually kind of where we've shifted a little bit, is trying to maintain that staff. It's so critical.
And John, what's your wish list?
Yeah, and I will do 1A and 1B. I will let Scott take the special ed, and but the second applicant can come here to Traverse City. But social workers, we've been given some resources for mental health from the legislature, and it's much needed. We know out of COVID, so much of the isolation that kids have been. We know there's a reality there and just increased pressures that we need support of mental health. And we've gotten funding for it, but there's not enough certified people with, masters in social work. And I'm sure that, Scott that would be his 1B, the same way. Is just we we have a posting and just, you're lucky if you get an applicant and you call them and interview them the minute it pops up and you can get on the phone. And so we could use a few more, no doubt. We barely have been able to maintain what we had before we got more funding from the state, and there's just not people in the programs. The programs at the universities that run them are getting calls daily from people saying, do you have anybody in the program, anybody that's going to graduate? Can they end early and start now? I mean, it is real serious. And so, and then we also compete with, the medical field and the private practice, in that area. And that's tough from that aspect. So that would really be an area that I know that, we as districts across state and in our intermediate school districts, especially with our special education students, with again, those services of social work and counselors, that there's no doubt that that's a need.
What is the current substitute teacher situation right now in all of your districts? You mentioned it's hard to hire teachers. Is it hard to find substitutes right now as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I think our pool of subs right now is at 3 or 4, and we already have one in place daily.
That's not a deep bullpen.
No.
That's really not. Similar situation, Scott
Yep, very similar. Very similar. Yep.
and John?
Absolutely.
I would imagine you have more than 3, but
Right. Yeah,
on a
but-
percentage
Relatively
basis.
speaking. Yeah, relatively speaking, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I imagine if you don't have a lot of substitutes and you already don't have excess educators in the building that can just shuffle around, when you do have a situation where the flu or snow days or life happens, that puts a strain on everybody, right?
It definitely does. I mean, we get by, but like that 3 number kind of every day, it's kind of sometimes we're short, and we have other teachers covering and principals covering that room, or even central office administrators that are head that way. Like Katie said, superintendents. I've been there, through the COVID, especially. I mean, there were times where I was in classes as a teacher or an aide, I purposely keep my teaching certification there just to, have that from that aspect. And so I will tell you that, with some of the funding we've got, we've been able to raise that a little bit. I think it's improved it a tad. But it's so because of some of these shortages, we're putting these people in the longer term sub situations. And so to have them for that day to day is, we kind of just, don't have enough some days from that, especially, as we get, still here in the fall where it's nice. Fridays sometimes get real tough. When it's a nice Friday, watch out, you're looking at the numbers at 6:30 a.m. going, oh boy, are we going to make it? And then especially towards the end of the school year, the same way. And it's tough. And what that does is, it's maybe a sports team that has to leave early. You just go, sorry, you're going to have to play on Saturday or take a bus on Saturday, that we just can't do that. And so it does minimize opportunities for kids, to be able to take field trips, for instance, that run after school and some of these things. So, because you just don't, maybe the teacher needs to be gone for part of it, but they have a sub normally in that other half. And sometimes we've had to tell people, I'm sorry, we just can't have you do that. And that's really a shame because we want to be able to provide that full opportunity for kids in our districts. And so again, anybody that's interested in that, we'd love to have you, and we sure appreciate the work they do.
Definitely.
Very similar head nods
Yeah,
all around.
yeah.
It's amazing
Some
to see.
trends going on here.
Switching gears a little bit, John, you mentioned social workers and mental health, and it is something that parents and I'm sure educators have been concerned about the mental health of our students going through the isolation of COVID, the uncertainty, some concerns with that and everything. So what is being done in each of your districts to address mental health, the mental health of our students as well as our educators? Katie, you want to start? You've already started nodding, so.
Well, I mean, it's something we're talking about all the time right now. We're investigating other ways to provide supports, because in Northeast Michigan, there's not a lot of supports, right? Like, where are people going to go to get to access these things? We have partnerships with NEMSCA, the Northeast Michigan Community Agency, and they help provide us with support staff to support mental health and support our students. We have a partnership with Thunder Bay Community Health. We have a medical clinic here in the school that provides behavioral health services. And our staff can access that, but it's kind of tricky when you remember the staff too. So we're looking at some different resources, like online types of resources, so they can access care for themselves, because that whole taking care of yourself piece is really important too. In order to be able to take care of these kids, we've got to take care of our staff. And so how we take care of them is a piece to consider in that conversation.
Scott?
Yeah, Katie hit it right there. I mean, I think, and John said it earlier in terms of the funding we received. It's been great to evolve and develop these partnerships with our local agencies, the health departments, the Alcona Healths, the Thunder Bays, the things that Katie mentioned. And because, like John said, for those types of positions, we'd be competing with the medical profession, and it just creates even a bigger challenge. So we've really, taken that on as a challenge and tried to create these partnerships that will bring those services into the school with the professionals that are best at providing that. And so instead of us going out and hiring our own, we've worked with the health department of Northwest Michigan to be able to provide those services and flow that funding that we're getting from the state to them, and having them bring in those specialists to the schools. And we've been very fortunate to have those positions filled, but it's very thin. We don't have a lot, to use your word from earlier, Mark, we don't have a lot in the bullpen there.
No.
We're thin. Our starting group is great, but boy, if one of them goes down, it's going to be thin behind them. So I think the partnerships are just critical to the success of addressing, again, like I said earlier, there's a lot of things that go into making a kid ready to learn. And that is a big one. Not only do we have to get them to school, the transportation, but then make sure they're fed so that they're not thinking about those things. But then we've got to now think about that state of being that the kids are in. And then, like you said, like Katie said, we also have to think about the staff. The staff we forget about them, that they give so much to the kids. And with COVID and the different demands that are now on our staff that have been a result of the trauma and all the things that have impacted our students, they're feeling that even more, and they take that home with them. They really do. The staffs in our Northern Michigan schools are tremendous, and they just value the impact they have on those kids so much. But in the end, sometimes it's almost too late, where they realize, geez, it's hard for me to give anymore when I don't have it myself. And so, like Katie said, a lot of the districts are working together to try to get those resources to our teachers so that they can remain mentally healthy and just ready to go every morning for the kids.
And John, are you seeing the same kind of, if you've been in education for a long time, it feels like in every industry, we're talking more about mental health than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. TCAP's feeling the same kind of prioritization of mental health for educators and students?
We are, and uniquely, so Katie, she talked about the struggle that you often might have in a rural area is having a hospital there, and some of that I think Gaylord's probably the closest hospital that you'd have there, and so we are fortunate to have that. At the same point, they're also competing for those same human, capital, those HR resources that we are. And so that can get really tough. And even from that in district to district, as maybe one district is, settling a contract and is paying a little bit more, we end up kind of trading people, and that's hard too, that, there's just because there's not enough that, when we lose one, that somebody else gains, we gain ones that we're taking it from another district, maybe, or from the hospital system. And now they're short, and we're trying to partner with them to get more resources. But when we take theirs, they lose theirs, and vice versa. So, that's really, really hard. And, one of the things we are trying to do is to try and coordinate with all of those folks to say, okay, if there are X amount of social workers or nurses that are available to do this, is there a way for us to at least all work together and know what each other has, and at least try to maximize all of those resources? And that's tough when you have different agencies and different ways they're funded. And, and sometimes, based on the funding, they can work with a special ed student, but they cannot work with a general education student based on where that funding source comes from, often from, the state or the federal government. And so we're trying to do that and look at all the grants possible. Something that's really fun that we were able to do is we were able to partner with some of our local health agencies and one in particular to be able to create a school-based health clinic at West Middle School, where we actually have a nurse practitioner and a social worker that'll be there. They're finishing up the remodel of a building that we had on that campus, and so that's going to be something that any TCAP student can take part of, and that's a really awesome additional resource that we have. But again, I could use one of those at literally every single school that we have. And so you're talking 16 of them versus one. And we're thankful to have the one, but that is the reality of as many stressful things have happened out of COVID and homelessness and, some different addictions that people have and how that affects kids, all those things, those social issues they are often right at our doorstep as school when that kid walks in the morning. And so, we are the ones that kind of see them every day. And I do say all the time, over, the last few years, especially, I think schools have been asked to become more than they once were. Once it was coming to, teach, and learn in school and everything else, you go home and you take care of everything else. And now, we're a food service, as we've mentioned. We provide mental health services, education, transportation, so many of these things. And so it's really a challenge to be able to do that. But at the same point, as educators, we want the absolute best for our kids from the minute they walk in to the minute they go home. And even when they get home, make sure they're safe getting there. That's kind of the superhero thing that all of us as educators, I think, put the cape on every day to do. And we're going to do our very best at it. But believe me, it has challenging days.
I think John really brings up an awesome point that always goes with that adage, it takes a village. And you heard him say that right there, all of the things that it takes to have those kids ready to learn. And I think that's one, silver lining out of COVID and some of these things that we're experiencing is the partnerships are stronger than they've ever been between the local agencies and the schools. And it's all for the benefit of the kids. And we've got to be efficient and we've got to be streamlined because we just don't have the people that we're used to having. So it's been great that way, though. It really has.
Changing gears now, let's talk about truancy. So according to a recent New York Times report, nationwide, Michigan ranks 4th for student absences, with 500,000 plus students who were chronically absent last year. Is this an issue in your districts? Scott, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. Very ironic. We just had our superintendent's meeting last week. Every month, our superintendents get together, similar as in John and Katie's counties and ISDs. And the beginning session was with our prosecuting attorneys in Emmett and Charlevoix County, and our probate judge, as well as some court administrators and local authorities. And it is definitely impacting the education. And again, it goes back to the village aspect. We are developing those relationships with our the courts, the local authorities to ensure that our kids are getting into school. And it's just so important that the communication between the three of us, along with the families, is just critical. If that does not exist and we aren't able to communicate effectively and efficiently, getting those kids into school becomes a very, very difficult task. And so I think putting more of an emphasis on that and making parents aware, unfortunately, in some cases of the consequences of that, is what it takes. But, we're all about trying to get the kids into school. And so it is a problem that our schools are facing.
In a small school, we know every kid's story.
Okay.
So the piece of truancy that's interesting is that statistic you read is based on data that the student has missed 10% or more of the school year. Well, most of us have 180 student days. So that's 18 days or more that they would have missed. 18 days is 3.5 weeks of school. So if your child has the flu and is out for a week, and then your child gets strep throat, and it takes a few days to get them to the doctor, get the antibiotics, and get them back in. You can see how quickly that could add up.
Yeah.
And so I think we've really tried to take a proactive approach so parents understand the importance, but also we don't want people to feel that they need to send sick kids to school because they're afraid they're going to be truant, right? So we have, as part of one of our partnerships, we have a truancy support person who actually reaches out to those families and makes sure that we have a plan. Like, do we have a plan? And that in our small district, that is something we've been able to do and establish those partnerships. Like Scott said, you got to have everybody on board. And occasionally we have a couple truancy things. What's difficult about our area, to be honest, we service Otsego County, Montmorency County, and Oscoda County. And depending where the student lives, depends on which court system you're dealing with, which sheriff's office you're dealing with, which state police office you're dealing with.
Wow.
So that also plays into how we handle our people.
John?
Yeah, I would say that this is one of those things out of COVID, no doubt, that's tough. Of, when we have those situations and you have a kid that's sick, I think that, it's been really stressed. Don't come to school sick, and I think before a kid had sniffles, this and that. Parents were like, no, you're going to school. And quite honestly, I've done a lot with, in the past, pre-COVID, we did a lot with attendance, programs that really strive for 5 and make it all 5 days a week and different things like that. And so, I think that's changed the thing a little bit. Like, no, stay home if you're sick. And, if it is COVID by chance diagnosis, it's like, there's the 5 days that the CDC recommends and all those things. So it's like, it can go quick. And I think with Katie's approach exactly is the way that we do that. We do have with our intermediate school district, Northwest Education Services, a truancy officer that was created just a couple of years ago. And then we've started a program that Katie actually is very familiar and very strong in Johannesburg, Lewiston of school success, which is partnering with the Community Action Agency, where we actually have somebody there that work with those at-risk students and to work with those families that might be having issues of attendance to really kind of know what's going on with that and try and figure that out. So there's no doubt that it's important for kids to try and be there every day. And there are extenuating circumstances, and I think taking on that case by case basis. But it is one of those things that I covered that I still think we're trying to figure out with, some of those realities. And, but we are exploring what are ways that we can make sure that, our schools, are promoting kids to come every day and to find ways to be able to do that. But balancing the issues of sickness and school health overall.
And I think what John said right there is back to what I was trying to say earlier, is that communication piece. Because if we do have a sick kid, we need to be able to talk to those authorities and to the courts to make sure that they understand, that is a potential here. So I think, that communication is just so critical, and trying to be proactive and work with the families is what the schools do best. And so just trying to continue that and create new ways to help engage with them.
So then at what point would the court step into this whole process?
So, like I said, we have a truancy officer, that will work directly with the prosecuting attorney, and they will take a look, and they feel that if a student, generally is, if you're hitting, a large amount of days, often we'll send a letter, or a phone call home, often from a building administrator, to have a conversation and see. And then when you have those, and again, I would say it's not a ton of cases. In TCAPS, I want to say it's literally less than probably 20 or 15 to 20, all year long. But you do get those situations where, a parent maybe, for instance, is experiencing homelessness and, kids not in. And so many times it's how can, the prosecuting attorney to see that, to maybe have a conversation, and to get with that parent. And a lot of times it's trying to help find resources for that parent to be able to get their kid to school. They don't have a vehicle, but, as a bus, wherever they're living, if it's a tent, I mean, we've seen it. I think people are shocked often to hear that, last year, I think we had almost close to 500 homeless students, K-12, in Traverse City area public schools. And so those are the realities when you're just trying to have, basic necessities of living, and you have children and they're living in a car or constantly couch surfing and just trying to figure out, so many of those things. It can be a challenge, and parents are just trying to make that work, and then they don't get the kid to school. So I think that's again working with the partners and something that I think Scott said that we do now better than ever. At the same point, we've still got work to do to get it even better, to find all those services that we can provide to those families and be able to say, here's a way that we can get your kid to school and they are getting that breakfast and that lunch and learning and safe and warm and dry and all those things. So that's the challenge that we do have sometime with those society things. But, most of the time we're able to get that back on track.
And it's kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say scare, but like when John says truancy officer, we have one as well. That role is really a liaison between the courts and the authorities with the families, trying to get them those resources that they need to get those kids to school on a regular basis. So we're fortunate enough to have a truancy officer as well. And the work that he's been able to do with our locals and with the courts and authorities has been great. And the more active and the more present that they can be in those situations where, like Katie said earlier, she's one of 3 people in that central office, and there's probably a secretary or 2 in her buildings. It just provides that additional level of support to the local districts, especially our smaller ones that need that support.
Yeah, we have our officer through our ISD as well. So
It must be very easy when people call your office, Katie. Your dial by name menu must be very easy to navigate. So if there's a silver lining. All right. So throughout this evening, we have learned all the roles that schools play with our kids. Their transportation, the meal service, and then of course educating our kids. But I can't remember the last time I talked to a school superintendent or a principal who didn't say priority number 1 was keeping your kids safe. They may not like lunch, but we're going to do everything we can to keep our kids safe, whether it's on the bus, whether it's on the athletic field, whether it's in the classroom. We're seeing more and more places across the country and across northern Michigan going back to school resource officers.
And that is huge. That funding stream that came through.
Yes. So
that specific funding for that was a super support. Our local police agencies are all short people too, right? I mean, so we cross multiple counties. I had to develop partnerships to try and see if I could get an SRO that we could have in our building that would meet all our needs. And Sheriff Chad Brown in Montmorency County needs a shout out just for he's just trying to get people. He doesn't have enough road patrol. And so, he's got some people in the districts over that way. We were able to partner with Otsego County because Sheriff Noicke was able to make his staffing situation work to get us somebody. And with that state funding, we had MSP supporting it through their grant and the state safety monies. The state safety monies aren't just for the SRO. I mean, we've been able to do a lot with that. Most of our districts are putting film on windows to make them stronger. They're putting in different cameras, vape detectors, all of these pieces to try and keep safety as the number 1 priority. So that funding stream has been huge, and we really hope that one continues.
Scott, thoughts?
Yeah, it's just like you said, Mark, that is the number 1 thing, is to keep our kids safe. And, I think the dollars have been great. And we're into, as Katie mentioned, her list of things right there. I think when we were all in school, I'm not sure any of those things were even known, to be honest, for school. The doors were always open, all of the doors, and some of the doors were even propped open. And so, it's just a different world. And I think one of the things that the schools are really trying to work on, and I'll take a little different angle, is the communication piece. And we really need the help of our communities to rely on the communications that are coming from the districts versus trying to read what's on social media and figure it out for themselves. Our districts are very good at communicating what is happening, the situations that they're dealing with, and trying to give that factual information about why a school is on a delay, why a school is closed for the day. And we were just really asked that those communications that come from the district, those are the ones that we're really honing in on and the ones that we're following. So I think that's, like I said, a little different tact, but it's a piece of the whole process. And just trying to get that communication out. And I know districts have communication plans that they're using very consistently, and 98% of the parents are right in on it. And so just continuing to make sure that they follow those, the facts that are being provided by the local districts is critical.
John, I want to give you an opportunity. I was in the room for some of the discussions with the county and the city and TCAPS regarding school resource officers, a re-welcoming back into some Traverse City schools of SROs this year.
Yeah, we were fortunate again, as Katie had mentioned, the grant dollars were huge. So we were able to get the funding for one SRO, but you can imagine 16 buildings. Again, when we talk about, I think there's a lot of folks would love them in every building. You've seen that in some states that have at least tried that. So we were fortunate to be able to get the funding, and recently just were able to get the Traverse City Police Department to put a school resource officer at Central High School. So we're really excited about that, and really appreciate too Garfield Township. They've supported and supplied not really a school resource officer, but a community police officer that is split between West High School and West Middle School, and then has some other duties a little bit within the community, but is there quite a bit. So we appreciate the support they've given to be able to allow us to have somebody present for those two buildings, and then again our West High Central High School has our new SRO from that. So that's been a great introduction of the key part is building relationships with kids. And so, when we see so many of these unfortunate and just, horrible acts that have happened, and we have a local group that's actually formed, a Safe Schools group, a committee of just local taxpayers and members of the community that have gotten together to really meet and look and research and learn about all this, of what they can do to help our schools. I think that, that so many of those times, those incidents have been that the student just didn't maybe have a relationship with somebody in the school, or didn't feel they could. And so, the more adults that we can get building relationships, especially with our at-risk students, the better chance we have of reaching them to not do something that, will hurt other students and other people in our community, even as they grow up. And so, we're very hopeful that that'll continue, and that, along with all of the other things that, TCAPS has done long even before, COVID, of secure vestibules and blue light systems and all of these different things that so many of us as districts have done with the dollars we've gotten either through bonds or what we've recently gotten through state dollars. Every district is, to go to find a district that doesn't have a front door that's locked with a buzzer system now. I can't fathom that there are many at all. And just trying to look at, what are the protocols and things in place. And again, as Scott said, it's unfortunate the world we live in, but we have an obligation, as for me, that, with students in the district. So first and foremost as a father, but as the superintendent and responsible to make sure every kid gets, to school safe and get home safe. Everything we can do. And so I can honestly say that everything we have the resources to do that we've been given, every district that I know is going full force with putting everything they can in place to maintain the safety of the kids in their buildings.
I would echo that, John. That's well said. The districts are just great stewards of those dollars and trying to make sure that they can do everything possible to keep those kids safe, to keep our kids safe.
Well, of course, as we started this school year, it was a little different from the past few years. COVID-19 is still around, still a thing, but it is not to the extent that it was a few years ago. Things are starting to kind of go back to normal, but of course, schools looked a lot different during the bulk of the pandemic. So are there certain things that your districts implemented during the pandemic that you realized, wait, we should actually utilize this all the time, and now that you're using it more?
I would start and say, there are definitely some things such as, we've found multiple places maybe the kids might be able to eat, that they're not just stuck in one spot, and be able to figure out different ways. And some are even, doing things with esports at the same time and giving some opportunities that, weren't just the kids in the lunchroom. But, for me, the number one thing that I think has come out of COVID is we had the chance to maybe meet some of our community partners and create relationships that we really just didn't have before. Like, I'm not sure, like in the previous years, I could have really told you more than 2 people that worked at the health department. And I can tell you a whole lot of people that did, or if for that matter, law enforcement, and county executives, that I don't know that I had relationships with, and, the mayor and all these different people that I think now, the community agencies, we sat many times early on in COVID on these phone calls and had these 20 and 30 people and 40 people and people from the state. And you kind of, every week you were meeting with these people and learning. And now it's kind of like, hey, I know so-and-so, let me call and see what they might be able to do with resource, or what information they have, or can we, what maybe we can create a session for parents. I'll give you one, like right now, just, kind of getting to know state police in that. We've done some, online, we've done some sessions with like cyber, security with kids online, that I don't know that we had those relationships as well before. And so I definitely think having those partnerships and getting to know our collective community leaders is something that came out that's made us stronger as a school and a community.
Scott?
I'll go back to the classroom and talk about the strategies that teachers learned that did and didn't work during COVID. But there were several that did, though, and bringing those back into the classroom and providing multiple ways to engage students in just meeting them with their needs instead of having, one way of doing it. Our teachers, I think, have really evolutionized the way that they're teaching and providing those different strategies that will engage students. And it's not all students go with just one. And so being able to diversify and meet the kids' needs has just been, I've been so proud of the teachers and how they evolved. Because I'll tell you, John and Katie can tell you, I mean, when that shutdown happened, man, I can't tell you how many meetings we had as an ISD with our local districts about how to use this or how to use that. And so, and some of them were good, and some we don't use anymore. I'll just say it that way. And so we're definitely learned from that. And I'll just echo what John said, and it's what I've been saying. I think probably a theme for me has been just that relationship piece.
All right, Katie.
They both said some great things. I guess the piece I would take is this. COVID freed us up to think about how we do things a little bit differently. It allowed us to take some risks, and it gave us some financial backing to go ahead and make those things happen. The one-time funding that we got from the federal government really helped us be able to implement some things that we wouldn't maybe have been able to otherwise. And one of the pieces that I learned the most from that, I've always done senior exit interviews. I meet with my seniors as they go, and I gather information from them. They're the consumers, right? So we got to find out what they have to say. We were forced to do that with some of those COVID dollars. And some of the ideas that came out of those groups were just amazing. We're implementing an outdoor classroom because the kids said, hey, we took a lot of frequent outdoor breaks so we could get those masks off and be outside. We need to do that all the time. We need that. We need that engagement. So it's pieces like that. And then it always comes back to leveraging your relationships in order to make that engagement happen.
All right, we are almost out of time. So, and we haven't put you guys on the spot yet. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a hot minute to think about this. I want to hear something really awesome or positive that's going on in your districts. So while you guys ponder on that, all right, we also want to remind all the families at home to fill out those forms to get to see if you qualify for the free and reduced lunch, because not only does that impact your lunch, but as John explained, that impacts funding in other areas as well. So those are super, super important. So even if you're not worried about lunch, it's super important. So fill out your forms, get those to the office, right? Maya, what does Katie need?
Katie also needs people to fill out those forms.
And she needs a K through 12 music teacher, right? And there are opportunities all around in all of these districts if you want to make a difference regardless of what your skill set is, that sounds like there are opportunities.
Yeah.
And there are opportunities to get training. There are opportunities for advancement in every school district that you can make a difference in the lives of kids starting tomorrow. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Okay. Anything else that we need to remind people of before we say goodnight? All right. Well, we would also like to take this opportunity to thank the three of you for giving us this insight, for giving us this time, for sharing your thoughts. It helped educate us. Hopefully it educated our viewers. And also we want to thank you for the work that you are doing in educating our children, especially you, John, because you actually, you might have driven my kids on a bus. It sounds like you're qualified to do everything else, right?
I respect the heck out of our drivers after doing it, and I leave it to them every opportunity I'm going to get. But in an emergency situation, I'll be there to help.
You can do that. All right. So we're going to wrap things up, but I want to hear one awesome, cool, positive thing. It doesn't necessarily, because we're putting you on the spot. So I don't want somebody at work tomorrow to be like, why didn't you say this? So this may not be the most positive, the most awesome. I'm giving you guys an out here in case somebody calls you on it. But Katie, let's start with you. Something cool, positive, awesome that's happening in your district.
In November of 2020, our community supported a bond. And that bond work is coming to fruition right now. And it is so exciting. So we're a small rural district, right? We're putting on an addition of a field house with 3 full-size gyms and an indoor track, an auditorium that seats 600 people, and it's got the real red seats. And the whole bang, like there isn't an auditorium in our community, in either one of the joined communities. And a full-size fitness center that we'll be able to have some public time for too. And along with that, there were some major overhauls in our buildings with windows and the HVAC system. And it was $22 million. And so it's a big deal in a small district. And so it goes without saying that is one really awesome thing that is coming due for our community and our students. And it's going to be pretty amazing when we can kick that off.
That's
awesome.
great, Katie.
All right, Scott. Awesome, crazy, cool, positive. What do you got?
Yeah, in addition just to the relationships and the collaboration that our district show across Shar-M, I'm going to highlight just Shar-M real quick. We have a Taylor School up in Petoskey where we have some of the students with some higher needs, and we were able to take the playground that was wood chip filled and really inaccessible for students in wheelchairs and walkers, and we were able to put down a turf surface where the kids can just go wherever they want. And the first day that they were able to go out there, they didn't even go on the equipment. They just sat on the turf because they were able to be out there with their friends. And so to see that, it may not sound like a lot to others, but I'll tell you what, man, that was just incredible. So that I'll highlight that in addition, like I said, to the district collaboration and across multiple ISDs. Katie and John and I have all been involved with different things across Northern Michigan, the transportation money that they were talking about. And I think just, I want parents to know how collaborative and how just together we all are in educating all of our kids.
All right, John, you know the routine. Crazy, cool, awesome.
I do. We're getting real close here this next month to break ground on 2 new innovation and engineering science centers at each high school that our robotics teams will be able to use and have field. And you want to talk about an engaging opportunity, watch kids in FIRST Robotics. And as they work till midnight with about, pizza and music and to go. And so we're excited to be able to provide that. To be able to do, and we host regional robotics tournaments and be able to have other schools be able to come and be a part of that is really special. So we're getting the final edges of the design phase and looking to break ground on both of those here next month, and hopefully have those for next year as the robotics season comes on.
That is awesome. It's so cool to hear all of the great things happening in all of your districts. So thanks so much for sharing that. And again, thank you so much for taking time to talk about some really important topics today in our town hall on education. And again, thank you for everything you do for your districts and for your students every single day. It does not go unnoticed. So,
well, thank you for giving us this opportunity to share. And so we value our partnership with you all as well in the media. And so thank you for this opportunity on behalf of all of our boards and our students and our staff. So thank you.
Have a great school year.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Bye,
take care.
guys.